Welcome back to another episode of Branching Out with Sierra. Today we're on episode 15, Healthcare Reimagined, Driving Change Through Empowerment. Today we are joined by Kelly Botta, and we're going to be talking about her transition from corporate healthcare to building her own direct primary care practice. We're going to be chatting a lot about empowerment and her commitment to empowerment, whether it's herself, leading herself effectively, or empowering her patients. So I want to go ahead and share Kelly Botta, my physician assistant that I actually have been receiving care for a couple of years now from. I'd love for you to share your background, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Yeah.
My background professionally, I'm trained at Shenandoah University as a physician assistant, and I graduated there a lot of years ago, about 15 now, I think. And so got my start there. I worked in the emergency department for several years. I worked in internal medicine practice for the bulk of my career, which is adult medicine, and that's still what I do today. So that's kind of professionally. And then I'm married. I have 3 children. And so they're what consume my life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful mom, beautiful family.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
I finally, this is actually very sad, I removed the Christmas card photo from my refrigerator and finally said, I think I should put this away now.
It's time. Yeah.
You have a beautiful family.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm excited for you to join me today because we're going to be talking a lot about your background and kind of what led to the practice today, but also kind of through a different lens of empowerment, which I'm excited for. But the same question that I always ask my guests. The first one is, when did you first consider yourself to be a leader, and what was that moment like for you?
I think that's a really challenging question. But I was thinking back, my parents probably are the ones to give credit to for me ever considering myself a leader, because I grew up in a family with 4 kids. And they really did an amazing job at teaching us to have self-confidence and always told us we were leaders, even when we were children. Yeah, and I didn't lead anything, So, but they would always say, you're an example for your brothers and sisters. And I wasn't even first. I was the second of 4, And so I know, and they would say that to us regularly. And so I think since I was young, I always kind of had that framework of, you want to be a leader up for yourself and other people are watching you, and so on sports teams that would commonly be talked about, how you're acting and modeling behavior. And so I think it started then through sports. And then, obviously you grow up into your own human, but kind of having that context and considering yourself that you would have the capacity to even be a leader was probably there since I was young. So thanks to my parents for that.
Yeah.
I think it gave me a lot of confidence, and we'll talk about fear probably at some point in this. It wasn't our talking about empowerment, but it was an amazing support system to have as a little person. And then I think more when I was older, maybe professionally in my career, once I hit maybe around the 10-year mark, and I felt like, wow, there's younger PAs here that I can, mentor and help. And I started taking students from Shenandoah University, and they would rotate with us. And sometimes you surprise yourself, at that point, like, okay, I know helpful things. I can be a mentor to somebody. And so I was probably around that point in my career that I thought, okay, I can start to take on some of these leadership positions. And so right now I serve as the regional coordinator for our area for the Virginia Physician Assistant Association. And so I get to kind of do that on a regular basis with some of the local PAs. So it's been really fun, but probably started around my 10-year mark in my career.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always interesting to ask that question because I find, well, for me, I didn't realize until like the age of 30 that I was a leader.
Yeah.
And so I often talk about the fact that we associate it with a specific title, and we've reached this title, this position, and now I'm a leader. When as a child, you were leading, right? You were influencing others' lives. And so what I'm really hoping that folks will start to understand and internalize and maybe share with their children, like your parents did with you. That every interaction is an opportunity to impact someone's life. And
I am like a poster child for that. I love that that's part of your mission, because that really has been such a gift that they gave us. And all of my siblings, we all kind of have that in us, where we all have a little bit of, feistiness, but this confidence that you really, I think, is attributed to just how the environment that you're raised in and what is spoken over your life. And I really believe in the power of words, and they can build you up or they can tear you down. And so I think that's a really beautiful message that you're putting out.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you could be a part of it.
Yeah.
We're in alignment.
Yeah.
So the other thing that I was curious about is if there were any specific events that kind of led to your interest in starting Smartypants Medicine. Talk a little bit about what led to that idea for you in the first place and kind of what you went through, your experience.
Sure. So it's interesting. It's been about 4 years now, 4, almost 5. Yeah. And so at that season of life, I think really was having my second child, and I was working a normal healthcare job with a lot of hours and a lot of demands. And I just felt like I couldn't merge very well these two lives that I had, these two passions of being a mom and, being in medicine. They just didn't really seem to be working for me. Yeah. And everybody doesn't have that experience, but that was my experience. And so at some point, it made me pretty unhealthy, and I just wasn't really happy anymore. And so trying to talk through that, and luckily I have an incredibly supportive husband, but I ended up just leaving healthcare. I knew I still wanted to practice medicine. I just couldn't do it in this way anymore. And so that kind of forced my hand to figure out, certainly there has to be other people who are like me who want to practice differently. And so it just led me to find a way to practice called direct primary care. And I then learned that we didn't have one here because I wanted to go work for somebody. And so ultimately I ended up starting my own. So it allows me to be a more fully present parent and still do what I love, helping patients and practicing medicine. So it's been a really great transition for me.
That's so cool. I love that when something doesn't exist, you just go out and create it, right?
Yeah, luckily I didn't have to think of the idea, I could just kind of learn from those who had gone before and bring it to our area. So yeah, it was intimidating, but I'm glad I went for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you went for it too. Thank you. What you said really resonates with me because I was in the same situation where I used to always say, I don't know as a classroom teacher how I could ever have children of my own, because I feel like I'd either not be able to give my own children the attention they deserve because I'm so focused on my classroom, right? Or vice versa. And so I was always so stressed about what would that look like? What would balance look like in that world? Can I do both? And we're going to definitely talk about balance. Yes. But so that's kind of, it totally impacted my health, and I had to make a change. Didn't really have a choice, but so glad that I did, right? So I think that that really resonates with me.
And it's super interesting because some people can do it, and so it's it's really beautiful because there's different lanes for everybody. But I think being in tune to the fact that you don't have to do it the one way that the majority of people do it is, and giving yourself the freedom to do something different and having the confidence to try it is really important, and it just shows that you can still use your skill set. You can still be equally effective. It just might look a little different. And if you're open-minded enough to that, you can make it work. Yeah. So
I have a feeling that there are plenty of people out there that don't know what direct primary care is. So when you said that, they're like, okay, but I don't get it. Yeah. So do you mind explaining what that looks like?
Yeah, thanks for asking me. So I forget that because sometimes I'm so close to it.
Yeah.
So direct primary care is primary care, right? So normal medicine for your everyday things. We treat acute medical problems, and then anything chronic you have going on with a big emphasis on prevention. So that's kind of what primary care is. Direct primary care is different because you have direct access to your healthcare professional. And so it's a little bit different than the traditional system where you're going through a lot of layers of nursing and staff and, signing in 6 times before you can send a message. And even that's new in the last couple of years that you can even send an email, to your healthcare professional or your provider. So this model, it's a different way to get healthcare where there's less barriers, there's better access, and it's more convenient for patients. and it puts the patient and the healthcare professional in direct contact with each other. And the idea is just trying to simplify medicine, because so many people don't seek out care because it's just a headache, quite honestly.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of effort, and when you don't feel well, you kind of just don't want to be bothered until you really, really have to. But unfortunately, that creates worse health outcomes, and it causes higher cost, and there's just a lot of negative outcomes in the system that we've kind of developed into in the United States. So this kind of peels back a bunch of those negatives and gets us back to, you know, kind of old school medicine before we had huge, massive healthcare systems and processes and stuff, and kind of simplifies things. It's also a monthly membership, which is a different way to think, you know, to think about care. So then an idea of that is just you can budget for your healthcare. So financially, it makes a lot more sense than getting a big surprise bill. There's no surprise billing. It's one of the things I loved about this model when I learned about it. Financial transparency doesn't exist in healthcare, and it's wild. It's the only industry that's still set up that way. And ethically, I don't like that about the profession. It bothered me as a provider when I worked in it. People would ask, how much is the stress test going to be? And I couldn't answer that question. I literally didn't know, right? There were so many layers to billing, and it was so complicated. So this kind of removes a lot of that questionable stuff and says, hey, this is your monthly membership. This is how much you're going to pay, whether you use it 5 times this month or not this month. And it spreads the cost of your care over the year in a way that most people can manage. It's cheaper than a gym membership usually. So that's a really cool piece. It's really hard to get your mind around if you've never heard before that you're going to pay for something on a monthly basis for your health, you know. But if you equate it to a gym membership, it's a little easier to wrap your mind around.
Yeah. Well, obviously, it makes total sense to me. And I have just found the ease of access to you and just feeling like I can reach out at any time with a problem, and that you're going to be there for me, and that you truly care. That's the part that makes the big difference, too, because I'm not just a number to you. And I've seen many times you know, step away from your life and things that you were dealing with to check in on me and see how I was doing. So those things mean the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was huge. And then just the fact that you will come to me. So I think of like busy professionals, you know, you can't figure out how to even fit it into their schedule, right? And I'm like, hey, Kelly, just come to the office. And you show up and you have everything you need, and it's amazing. What services you can provide in person at the office blows my mind too.
Thank you.
We're not going to go into all the things Kelly has done for me, but yeah, it's amazing. So I feel so blessed to have you in my life, and I know that I can trust you with my health. And obviously, we're going to talk about preventative care as well a little bit more, but that piece of not always just being reactive, that's been important to me, especially with my Lyme disease. I always share that, like, I need to be looking ahead and look for symptoms and know what's going on so that, you know, I can stay ahead of things. So
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And I think, you know, it's not at all a slam on other healthcare professionals, but in this model, you're just able to feel what is there, you know, because we have more time, and because the system is set up in a way that you get to experience care, right? As opposed to like you're just in and out in 7 minutes, and like you can't have access to that person after that unless you really, really are trying, right? So I think it's really emotionally like makes you feel better about practicing medicine, like as the provider, that you know you're able to provide that to your patients, because I still had that before in the other model. It's just that it didn't connect the same way.
Okay.
And so this way feels a lot more aligned, you know, with why we went into medicine, which was to care for and help people, you know, and help get them through these hard times. So that's really neat to hear that feedback.
Yeah, of course. And when you were talking about the transparency when it comes to the cost of things, the day that it occurred to me that if I went to have a test done somewhere, and if I said I needed to do cash pay instead of going through my insurance, I would actually end up paying less than going through my insurance. That day, I was like, okay, something's going on here. Hold on. So yeah, I feel like just being able to have a monthly subscription with you and be able to look ahead to the year and know exactly how much my care is going to cost. And then, you know, if I am going to run tests or labs or whatever, we always have a conversation about, okay, how are we going to run this?
Right.
So I think that that's been helpful when it comes to the cost?
It's absolutely a problem in our country. And I think right now we've been trained in traditional care that we don't talk about finances at all in the exam room with our patients, right? And the problem with that is 40% of the country is in healthcare debt. And so us acting like there's not an elephant in the room is not helping. And so I think it's really important to meet people where they are, and that includes their finances sometimes. Now, are we going to choose what treatment to do based on that? No, we're not going to, but we're going to have a discussion if we're doing something elective. Can you afford to do that right now if it's not urgent, or do you need to push that out for a month? And is that okay? And can I advise you on that medically? And what does need to be done right now? And we need to figure out how to finance that, or what can wait? And it takes 2 minutes to talk about, right? But I think the whole thing is us as providers being educated. We're not educated on the finance of medicine at all.
Okay.
So all of this stuff that I've learned has just been literally me learning the healthcare side, or the business side of healthcare. And so we kind of understand billing and coding because there's a whole team that does that for you usually, or a service. But since we don't bill insurance and we don't have to have a whole team, you learn as a provider. And so then you're able to add this additional layer of value to your patients. Oftentimes, just giving you guys that information, would save you the amount of money to pay for the membership many times over, right? And so that also feels amazing to be able to help people that way. It's been a fantastic experience.
That's great. So I'm sure every day hasn't been a fantastic experience from day one, right? So let's talk a little bit about that fear piece of it all.
Sure.
So anytime you're going through a transition, especially moving out of where you were in healthcare to creating something that didn't exist in the area before. I'm sure there was fear. There was probably self-doubt. Can we talk a little bit about that experience for you and how you overcame that?
Sure. Haven't thought about that in a while. It's been a minute. So I think, anytime you do something new, there's a little bit of fear, is this going to work, to kind of testing the waters. And like I said, I had small children at that time. So the most amazing thing, I can't say enough about my husband, Jeff. He made this possible because, we looked ahead together and we thought, how can we do this financially? How can we figure this out financially? How can we do this with our time? What would be a good test for us to run and see if there's an appetite for this in our market? And so, through multiple conversations, I think it gave me the cushion financially to be able to take a risk. And so because we stewarded our finances well up to that point, we had an opportunity where we could take a little bit of a risk. And because that's really what it takes to start something new. And I'm used to getting X, and when I start this, it's going to be way down here. It is a risk. There's no way around it. So I'm super grateful that he kind of stayed steady and that was also on board with saving so that we could take the leap, and I think that's just the kind of guy he is. But then I also think we were smart about doing it. So it helped me kind of take the leap to talk to other owners, who are not in this area and say, what was your experience like? And after you interview enough people, you kind of see these patterns. And so those patterns were largely I love what I'm doing. It works financially. The patients enjoy it. I love practicing medicine. All this kind of on repeat. Then you start to say okay, this is the pattern. This isn't just a one-off fluke that they had success, you know? And so I think that really helped me have confidence that this would be worth chasing.
That's great. So at what point did you realize, okay, this is working? How long did that take? Because I'm telling you, I told someone yesterday, I don't think my business actually clicked where I was okay, I think it's actually sustainable until December 2023. I think it took years for me to feel okay, this is going to work.
It's interesting. It's been kind of a morphing process because I never started it to think I would be doing this more than just a part-time keep my hand in medicine while I have kids. This was kind of a personal solution for me. I didn't want to do all that required in a normal setting, but I didn't want to run 100 miles an hour and grow something huge either. I didn't want to trade one to just go back to it. And so it's just kind of started just to see is this enough just to keep me mentally and practicing medicine, scratch the itch, if you will, And so I took enough people that first year where I was this is awesome. I love this. And then I think after that, there continued to be interest where it was I could actually do this as a business, And so then I kind of mindset shifted from not it's a hobby, but on the business side of things, kind of, to I really think this is a service our community needs. How can I develop this and grow it so that I can serve more people, both professionals who are in my situation and patients in the community who are looking for something that's not here.
Yeah.
And so that probably happened more around like year 2.
Okay.
Because I started to get busy enough where I was like, I need to have a plan to grow, right? Like,
yes.
I can't just keep taking people on. I need to have a plan to go here.
What is my cap here?
Yeah, so that pushed me. But the other thing was a lot of these practices didn't do what I was doing, which was house calls. A lot of them had, they started out of a physical location. And so your capacity for how many people you see is different.
Yeah.
And so nobody could really tell me, when are you full time? There wasn't really an answer to that. And so I just had to be more aware of like what feels like too much and then, peel back from that. So my goal is to not work full time ever again in my life. And I don't want anyone who works for me working full time either. I think that, I don't know, just culturally, I think that we push a little bit too hard and it really is negative for our relationships and our health. So, full time is like 40-hour plus work weeks. Tons of us do that in the US, but I'm just in the season of life, I'm not into it. So we can be successful, with a little more margin for our health. Yeah.
I think I'm getting there.
Yeah.
I'm getting there. It kind of goes along with the balance thing that we'll talk about, but I feel like I am still in the I need it to make the most sense financially for me piece, because it goes back to my medical care. When I went through my Lyme disease, I was charging everything on credit cards. That was the only way I was going to get the health care I needed, right? So it's been years and years and years that I'm still paying it off. So for me, it is I have to drive this and go as hard as I can go until I kind of reach that clean slate that I need to feel like, okay, now let's see what balance looks like.
Yeah.
So
I'm like, I want to apologize for the industry. I mean, when I hear stories like that, I'm just like, what are we actually doing? Right.
Yeah.
So I think, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know the healthcare system needs some reform. Like that's not some big news flash, right? Like I think we all feel that, whether you're working in it or experiencing it. It feels a little bit disjointed at this point. And so I think we've done it, the industry has done its best to kind of grow, but I think what it's grown into is not exactly what we thought. It's kind of, taken on a life of its own. And at this point, it's so complicated.
It is.
It's hard to reel backwards. So I certainly recognize that what I'm doing is not a solution to the entire healthcare system, but it is a solution for our local community. And so impacting things where you can, I think, is part of being a leader.
Yes.
Recognizing where you can create influence and then doing it and showing up. And so it's been great.
And you're showing up. So.
Yes. Trying. Most days showing up. Yeah.
So thinking about the mindset shifts that had to take place for you in order to make this transition, tell me a little bit about that.
Oh man. Well, I think there's a lot of layers to that. Hopefully I'll remember what I was thinking through, but one of them was just overcoming fear in general. Not something I like doing. I think it's really uncomfortable for most people. And I don't think I was probably in my 30s, like you said, before I really recognized that I did this all the time. I avoided things I didn't want to fail at. And I wish I would have learned about that earlier as just like a concept.
Okay.
Because I see it having like held me back from trying new experiences that I probably would have loved, like looking back through high school and college, because I was afraid that I wouldn't perform the right way, or I wouldn't if I wasn't good enough at it, I would be disappointed in myself, right?
Yeah.
And so I just would avoid it altogether to like risk mitigate. So when I finally realized I was doing that when I was an adult, I actually made myself for a full year do things I thought I could fail at on purpose, to get over the fear of just failing. So I took a ballet class as an adult. That was super uncomfortable.
I was going to say, what was that like for you?
It was super uncomfortable for me. I mean, I loved dancing, but I had never done ballet ever. And it's like a very technical thing, So that was hilarious, but also enjoyable. I did kickboxing.
Okay.
So that was really different. I'm trying to think back through that year. That was many years ago. But I did this all these kind of things that were like new and different and just out of the box to force myself to at least experience that. And then hopefully that shifted my mindset. And I think that did help. So overcoming a fear of failure, I think, was huge. Being willing to bet on myself.
Yeah.
And I remind myself of that pretty much weekly.
Yeah. Well,
I bet on myself every day because I know how consistent I am and that I show up and I know I have drive, and just reminding myself like that is who I am. It's in me. And I don't think I realized everybody didn't really have that, but I do. I have this constant motor and this constant drive, and I want things to improve, and I want to lean in and do whatever it takes to make it improve. So good or bad, like that's my personality. And so as a business owner, that usually works to your advantage. As long as you can reel it in, and don't go too crazy. But as far as other mindset shifts, I'm trying to think.
Before you go to another one,
yeah,
I want to ask a question about that. So when you use the word failure, I can't help but question what that looks like to you. What does it look like to actually fail? Because I've had a lot of conversations with people about that before, and our definitions may differ.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know that I've ever defined it, but I think in this context, I would be thinking, more performance oriented. So however I wanted the outcome to be or to look or whatever I thought was supposed to be the
Not
accepted
perfection
normal.
though, right,
Oh yeah,
Kelly?
100%.
Are we talking perfection?
100% perfectionism. Okay. Yeah. Didn't want to not hit the mark because I'm used to being able to get close to the mark. And if I can't even get close, like I don't even want to participate, right? And so I'm also incredibly competitive. And so those are all kind of like interchanging words.
Yes.
And then when you add in a business standpoint, and when you're doing this for your career, you also add in like financial pressure to that, and you don't want to fail from that standpoint. And you add in like you don't want to look like you're unprofessional, And so there's kind of all these layers, not just not just the perfectionism piece, but it's a lot heavier whenever you're doing it, doing something professionally.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the podcast, because I specifically did this because I was terrified of it.
I'm so proud of you.
Because that's where we grow, right? Outside of the comfort zone. So someone mentioned it to me, someone mentioned it to me, you should do this. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put out there that I'm doing it, because if I don't tell other people, I'll never do it. So then I knew I had to, and I had 30 days to turn it around and make it happen. So yeah.
It's very brave.
Yeah. And I might be failing, but hey, I'm trying, girl.
No, you're doing it, so you can't be failing, right? If
that
was your goal.
Hold on.
If that was your goal.
Let's turn that one around. You're doing it, so you can't be failing. And that's what I wanted to get to, is because I have perfectionist tendencies. You know me. We're wired very similarly. That I had to really work on the fact that as long as I'm growing in it, I haven't failed yet. I fail the moment I stop trying. That's the difference. So when you see the podcast stop, then you can call me up and be like, so you failed.
So what are you doing? No, unless you intentionally stopped it for a really good reason, right? You didn't just like give up out of frustration or, something that you couldn't overcome.
But do you see what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, totally. I 100% agree with that. It's very relatable. I mean, I think everybody in some level relates to that, right? Like, and it's self-protection to not try. So,
all right, let's talk about other mindset shifts. Where were you going when you said to number 2, and then I pulled you back?
Jeez, let's see. I think it was a big mindset shift to just look at the healthcare system, as a system, and not just like me with my patients.
Okay.
Right, practicing medicine.
Yeah.
To have to really zoom out and say, like, how do all these parts interact with each other? Where are the other errors that patients are feeling like the system doesn't work? And can we fix that so their experience with our practice is better? Not just our face-to-face provider-patient relationship, which I can control easily, but some of these outside factors, like the labs, like the imaging, like the specialty referrals, like, a lot of these things that really just bog down people's experience and make it negative. I had never really tried to fix those problems or even brainstormed about them. But owning your own thing, you want it to be a seamless experience too, as much as you can influence it. And so that was kind of a different part of the system to look at. And I just think it's, as someone who's in the industry, if you're not in the industry, that's probably super boring to you. But if you are in the industry, like, I would just encourage you to think about those things. And there are probably improvements that you can make if you just paused, or made 2 phone calls and asked the questions. You know what I mean? And so going the extra mile on gaining the correct knowledge so that you can create a smoother experience for your patients, like that is valuable just as much as getting them the right medication, because if they don't show up at whatever you scheduled for them, the plan's not going to work. And so I think trying to eliminate barriers along the whole continuum of care, even if it's outside of our primary care direct, contact. And you just don't have time to do that in a normal system. So that's been kind of fun, but really a really different way to think about helping people is like navigating more along the continuum of care. And then I think realizing the power of networking and realizing that you don't have to feel salesy just to go to a networking meeting. Like you're not selling anybody. I think that was something I was afraid of when I started the company, was I didn't want to be selling what I was doing. At the same time, if you shift that into, I'm simply educating people that there's another option on the table that they can choose or not choose, but I just want you to know the option is there. That completely revolutionized how I talked to people about what I was doing. Instead of being uncomfortable or feeling like I was trying to get people to like the idea I was doing. It was just like, hey, this is a service I'm providing. You can take it or leave it, but just so you know, this is a choice. And if it's not for you, it might be for somebody else. That was a really big barrier at first because we don't really network and do sales in healthcare as providers anyways. People just show up on our schedule and we see them. So it's different when you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Well, I remember my first networking experience, and I remember standing in the corner, like out of fear of, how am I going to approach these conversations? I don't want to appear salesy. I don't want to appear transactional. I want to build a relationship, right? So I like the way that you kind of reframed it as, I just want you to know what options are available to you, right? That's it. I'm educating you. So I like that mindset shift for you. And it sounds like it's working because I've seen you out at events and
and I'm very extroverted, by nature. So it's interesting that still felt uncomfortable to me because I really enjoy, like, I'll talk to the random person in line at the store just to pass the time, that's just kind of in my personality. But yet when it came to trying to put myself out there, I didn't want to be perceived, again, probably comes back to the perfection thing, but I didn't want to be perceived as being pushy or trying to be, I guess pushy or salesy. And so just having that mindset shift, if anybody else is, gun shy at going to networking meetings, that's definitely something you should read about from someone who's more educated about networking. But that was my simple takeaways. If you just reframe it, really helped a lot with being able to enjoy being there and learn about what other people were doing instead of really focusing so much on yourself,
That's a really good point. And that's how I get myself through it is I want to learn as much as I can about other people. If they happen to ask about me, that's a bonus, right? But I'm going in to learn about others and how I can support them. And do they have a need where I actually have a connection that would benefit them? If you go in with that mindset, and then if someone asks you, then feel free to talk about yourself. But I think that has really helped me.
I agree with that. And I think once you realize the power of networking, it's almost a fun game. Yeah. Where you can connect person's need to that, to that person's need. And there's something intrinsically rewarding about being able to help people that way and find what they're looking for. So
I think so.
It shows that you're a mature networker. If you can connect the dots, which I've experienced personally with you. So I appreciate that about you.
Yeah. Well, thanks. All right. So going back to the mindset shift number 2 for a second, actually, when you were talking about really seeing ways in which you can improve the experience for a patient, right? And kind of from their perspective, it made me think of, I had this experience the other day. It was a design thinking exercise. And what we had to do, and this sounds totally off topic, but I swear it isn't. We had to design a gym, a whole facility. And we had to map out from start to finish, like, when does the experience begin? Is it from the moment that they check at home the website to see what classes are available that day, right? Like, where does the experience start and map from when they arrive in the parking lot to when they walk in the building and they're in the lobby, and every single piece. And it made me think about every opportunity where there is a breakdown for a potential, like, customer, right? So then I started thinking about my business from, like, start to finish, every interaction, like, where do I need to solidify it? So thinking, like, about the healthcare perspective of, you worked in that setting before, and what were your patients experiencing before, and now you're able to look at it and think from start to finish, how can I make their whole experience better? I love that. I think like it really helped me doing that exercise, and I recommend, you recommended it for healthcare, but I'm going to say no matter any industry, it doesn't matter what you're in, stop, put yourself in your client's shoes from start to finish and figure out where are those gaps, where can you kind of solidify the relationship too.
I totally agree with that. And I think like when you say it, it sounds so obvious,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know that everyone has really done that or been in the position to be able to create the change that they would want to, which I think is where you find yourself when you're in a really big organization. If they don't have channels, where they can't lean in to people who are on the front lines, that's where you're going to have an issue. I think the bigger companies can still do this, but they've got to have those avenues where they're hearing from people who are on the front lines, and it's not just everyone in the C-suites, right?
Right.
And so as smaller businesses, we don't really have that issue. You're like the whole shebang usually, or you and your small team. And so if you want to impact change, it's much easier. It's much more rapid. And so that is really fun because you feel like you can't totally control the experience, but you can do a better job at having at least awareness, or if there's a hiccup you can't fix, having compassion for it and pointing it out or helping them figure out ways around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And asking for feedback, just in general, stopping and asking people for feedback and taking that to redesign, your processes. A lot of times we're moving at a speed that doesn't allow us to stop and ask. And I even know for you sent out surveys before to your patients to ask about, preferences, and that helps you make business decisions. So
yeah, it does. Can I comment on that?
Yes, comment, please.
So I don't know when we're going live, but I think probably by the time this goes live, one of the things on that survey was people, I asked them about house calls versus having a location. And a lot of people wanted a location, which I was surprised about. Yeah.
I didn't mark that.
Yeah. I was actually very surprised by that. And this was actually probably, I don't know, over a year ago. Okay. But, when you are designing something that's meant for your people, you listen and try and make those changes. And so we're moving towards that aggressively so that we'll have options, and people can, again, interact for their own medical care, how they feel most comfortable. So that's really exciting for us.
That is so exciting. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Can't wait to
I'm excited to put it out there and see who comes,
Okay.
It's another leap. It's another leap. But yeah, you'll have a choice, and that's the really neat thing is we really want to listen in medicine and not just listen for, physical symptoms and what's going on, but the whole experience impacts people's health. And we just want to remove as many barriers as possible.
I am amazed. That is awesome. I'm really excited to see the space too.
Thanks.
So I will come out, even though I want you to still come here. I will come to you.
Fair.
All right. So thinking about educating, because you've mentioned educating before, educating your patients, really empowering them to make their healthcare decisions as well. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like for you?
Yeah. I think in a more traditional sense, it's just educating about whatever's happening in their body. And so I think I really believe that knowledge is power in really all of life. Yeah. And so if you give people better information, they can make better decisions. And so, my job as a healthcare professional is to give you the information. Here's where the best evidence is today. Evidence is always changing in medicine. But this is the best evidence that we have. These are your choices. What do you want to do with your own health? Because ultimately, it's your choice. And so, we can be your guide, and that's my role. I see it in healthcare is I'm the guide, and then you make the decisions for your own health. And I don't know that that's communicated clearly in a traditional setting. Yeah. But I've tried to use that language with my patients because ultimately, you're living your life and you're making your day-to-day health decisions, and whether you exercise or not, and whether you pick up a cigarette or not, or whether you have an extra burger or not, or whatever your issue is, whatever goals you have for yourself, you're the one making those. And so for us to just affirm as your healthcare professionals in that space, you are the one directing your own health, and we're just here to help you. I found it really fun to have time to do that. And so I think the key factor for being able to educate is having time.
Yeah. Can we talk about the length of time that you spend with clients? Because I know that my experience has been like, if I go to a lot of providers, it's in and out within minutes, right? And I find that when you come here, and maybe it's just because I have so many problems, that might be it. But you spend a lot of time looking, and in my opinion, like every body system and how everything is working together and how one thing might be impacting other things. And like, it's a lot of time and a lot of education around it. So I mean, what would you say on average? What amount of time are you spending with folks?
Yeah, so our visits on average are probably close to an hour with every person.
So it's not just I mean,
I love
problems.
you to death. No, that's pretty standard what we offer. Because our bodies are complicated and our lives are complicated, and sometimes just having time to lean into that gives you the answer, and it has nothing to do with there's a pathologic problem going on. It's just we had to have time to identify this, which caused this, and the downstream. And so, we're trained really well in critical thinking. We're trained very well in diagnostic skills in school. We have the capacity usually to figure out what's going on. I think the key thing that we're missing oftentimes is time. And so, this has been a really beautiful model for that, because it gives you that, because the whole premise is not that we get paid based on volume.
Yeah.
We get paid based on value. And so if we're providing really good value to our patients, they stay on with us, right? And so the incentives are aligned appropriately. And so I think in the healthcare system at large, one of the criticisms, not of all you specialists out there who might be listening, but a big criticism of the specialty and like having people move into specialties is that they get reimbursed better for doing procedures. And so there's this, not that we're making those decisions for the wrong reason, but there is this kind of background pressure, that you might do things that reimburse you better.
Yeah.
And that's just humanity. It's like, it's nobody's fault. I would never say anyone's unethically, signing people up for procedures, but we do know that people get more procedures, right? And so there's this weird nuance there of trying to do the right thing. And so I think if you remove the financial piece from that decision making, it's just better for everybody, And so I'm really happy to be functioning in a practice where that's not the driver. I don't need to see 25 more people a day. That doesn't make me any more money than if I see 2 people a day and take care of them well.
Yes.
And so that really, it gives patients, I think, a really much better experience.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It does. It's working for you. The other way that I think you're really great at educating is via social media. I've seen some really awesome reels and posts. And the thing is when you and I meet, it's about me and my specific concerns, right? But I noticed that the things that you put out also bring awareness to everyday health things, right? Self-care, and I'm pretty sure that I saw something at some point about preventing choking for a child, right? And then my heart sunk and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if Caleb's choking, right? So it just makes you aware of all of these things that you can do, preventative care as well, and having the right tools and resources you need in case something were to happen. So your reels are awesome. So social media is a way that you educate not just your patients, but just in general, putting it out there for people. So thanks for doing that.
You're welcome. I hadn't even thought of that. Super uncomfortable to do as a healthcare professional, right? That is not a thing that we do. That's not normal, but it is a way to connect with people, and like it or not, it's part of our culture, And so I think just being willing to embrace that, being willing to put yourself on camera, again, not my favorite thing to do. I don't like to be on camera, but here I am showing up, right? Because I think, like I said, I really believe that knowledge is power. And so just giving patients somewhere they know that's reliable, that's not a scam. I'm a real human with a real practice, treating real people who went to a real school and has education. And this is a trusted source for educational information. I want to be that in our community, and I want to show other providers who maybe have an interest in that it's okay to put education out there. And we know, studies show that people don't really change necessarily just by hearing information, but they change, when you have a relationship with them and you're vested. And so there's something different about seeing pictures of your family, or, seeing me out doing a run, that really personalizes things for people, and I think has probably more influence than we give it credit.
Yeah. I think it does build a better relationship. It makes you like a real human. I'm not gonna lie. It just makes you like everyone else. We always talk about, well, they put their pants on the same way, like one leg at a time, right? Yeah. But like when you really look up to someone, I really look up to you. But thinking about you being just like me and having concerns just like me, it does build a stronger relationship and trust.
Thank you. That's really kind. Yeah, it's encouraging because, like I said, it's not my super favorite thing to do. But when you get that positive feedback every once in a while that maybe there is value there, then that's really helpful. So I'll get back on my social media.
I was going to say consistency, right? That's the hard part. It comes in waves. I can tell you the social media thing definitely will come in waves. Yeah. I have found that I schedule all my stuff in advance. It takes some pressure off. So it's not, I don't have to be inspired in the moment because I'm not going to slow down and I'm going to make a social media post. I can't think like that. So
we will talk about balance, right? You can't have all the things at top notch right now. At every single moment, all the time.
So we've talked a little bit about empowering your patients. So what are some of the results that you're seeing by focusing on giving your patients what they need, the time they need, the resources they need? What are you noticing?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Oh gosh. Yeah, it's there's a lot you could say. There's a lot of different patient examples there. Probably one of the most recent, one or two, I guess. Screening lab work has become very important and high on my list of really pushing people to do. Nobody likes going to get their blood drawn, getting up early, getting stuck with the needle. Nobody likes doing that. But unfortunately, we do find things when we do screening lab work. And so I've had several patients recently go in for their annual kind of lab work, which I like to do before you're seen with me, so we have results and we have time to go through them line by line, and I can really explain to you what's going on with your own physiology and where we can maybe, it's in the normal range, but it's not optimized kind of conversations. We have time to do that, so that's been a fun thing. But recently finding, anemia, which is low blood counts, person had symptoms of, but were very vague symptoms, and so maybe wouldn't have even brought them up necessarily. And then us going on to find, this isn't just iron deficiency, you need to go in and have a scope. Okay, we have something that's wrong, we have a colon cancer, things like this. And then being able to deal with that now, as opposed to when you were really, really anemic, maybe you would have ended up hospitalized, maybe would have been further down the road with this cancer, which was the problem, and so finding things like that from a simple blood test is just wild, and so the body eventually will tell us with symptoms. You'll eventually get short of breath and tired, right? That's really not when you want to find things. It's much better to find them early, when we can save you from a lot of that suffering, and also, make a better impact. So that's an example recently. And then one of the other cool things, with education would be these continuous glucose monitors.
Okay.
I don't know who your listeners are or if they would be in the wellness space at all, but they're these monitors that you can wear. And they used to be just for diabetics. And so they monitor where your blood sugar level is, whether it's too high or too low. And then we would give you insulin, based on those numbers. And so they were kind of siloed off in this diabetic world, insulin-dependent diabetic world. But recently, as the cost of them has come down, a lot of people have been interested in, if they're trying to lose weight, what is my body doing? What is this weight doing to my body? And so there's these big terms like insulin resistance and metabolic, if you have metabolic syndrome, and what do all these things mean? And they're so vague, and they're very hard to get your head around or even care about, especially if you're a patient. What does that even mean? So these continuous glucose monitors are something we can get you now that you can wear, and when you're eating, you can see what foods are really spiking your sugar up really high. How quick does that happen? what about if I go for a walk after I eat that meal? How does that bring my sugar down? Like what is actually happening in my own physiology in real time?
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Right? And it's a really powerful motivator because you actually see what I'm putting in my mouth is related to what's happening in my body.
Yes.
And it also helps people identify like, well, what if I, use sweet potatoes instead of like a white potato, and did that make a difference, and that kind of stuff. My quality of sleep and what happened to my sugar in the morning, and all of that. So that's been a really cool tool for people to use and to be able to create behavior change for weight loss, which is where so many chronic diseases come from, is metabolic dysfunction. And so that's been kind of fun to have the time to educate people about and get them and go through with them and just see really positive change that's sustainable. So that's been fun.
That is so interesting. Like I feel like sign me up right now. But like in the opposite, right? I want to know, like, because I feel like mine's always dipping, and I'm like, I need to get my blood sugar back up. And I know for a period of time, when I was like pricking and testing, I did get a little obsessive over like, okay, well, how did this impact? So to have a continuous test, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, the technology in healthcare is amazing. And so just having the time to find where patients can afford that, because it's not going to be through their insurance unless they're diabetic. It's not going to be paid for, right? So where can we find this that's both economical, and you can get to it conveniently, and how do we do that? And that whole process, and then the feedback loop of how's it going, and the ongoing kind of communication. It's been really neat.
Yeah, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. I'm learning so much today from you.
There's lots of things like that. There's stuff like that with the heart, and monitors you can wear, and just different technologies that we have time to use.
I feel like you kind of spoke to it, but in your first example there, you were speaking about the preventative care aspect and the importance of lab work. Is there anything else you want to share about preventative care, or any specific tests that you recommend that folks look at doing on an annual basis and asking their physicians about?
Yeah, that's a massively important question. So prevention in general, it's always going to be better for you if you find things early, right? It's going to be better financially. It's going to be better physical outcomes. We have study after study after study after study that shows that. And so I just think getting established with a healthcare professional, doesn't matter what your age is, you can get sick at any age, unfortunately. And when you need someone, you need them right now. And so you don't have time to sit on the wait list. Unfortunately, in our area and across the country, there's been a shortage of primary care providers for 10 years. And I think Mark Nance actually put something in print recently that we're about 75 primary care providers short in our tiny little Winchester area, right? And so there's a massive gap. There's a massive need for healthcare. And if you're not in somewhere when you have a problem, like, you're going to have a bigger problem. And so I just always encourage people to get connected somewhere, even if you can only get in once a year. And even if they give you like the quick rundown, at least you're connected to someone who knows the right people if you have something bad happen. And so I just would strongly encourage people, especially in this environment where we don't have good access. You might be waiting 4 to 6 months to be seen for something routine, and you're not going to get in if you're sick. So that means you're going to end up either at the urgent care or the ER, which are great. They're life-saving places, but you don't want your problem to have to get to that level. We want to catch it early. So just that piece. And then I'm trying to think. I had another point in my mind, but it's escaping me right now.
It's okay. If it comes back to you, you can share it.
All right. Oh, lab test. Yeah. Okay, I got it. So the other just big thing that I harp on in my practice, and probably all of you guys know this and all of my patients know this, but is just, we're not just trying to have you healthy next year. We're trying to have you healthy for the next 10 years. What are your health goals for the next 10 years? What do you want to be able to accomplish? And so whether that's, in your age group and you have fitness goals that you want to achieve, or you have pain that you want to stay out of, or whether that's someone who's 65 and they want to be able to get on the floor with their grandkids and still be able to swim and throw the ball, right? Like, those things are important to communicate. And one of the main drivers of disease in our country is heart disease. So I'm always harping on heart disease, right? I'm an internist, internal medicine. We're like, that's the mecca of all the things, right? Your heart. And so quite frankly, we're not doing a great job as a country preventing heart disease. It's rampant. It's the lead cause of death in men and women. And we're trying, we're trying hard, but we're not really close to moving the needle on that. And so I've gotten a lot more aggressive at screening and not just doing a cholesterol panel and saying you're good to go. That's a really narrow set of data to be able to say, like, generally your cardiovascular system's healthy. I think it's kind of unsophisticated, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, can we not do better? And so I think at least one test that everyone should have is called an ApoB. It's just apolipoprotein B is a different lipid molecule. And it's just another thing that can possibly go wrong that's not picked up on a traditional cholesterol panel.
Okay.
It's recommended by the American Cardiology Association to be checked, and we just don't widely do it. And so I don't know what the coverage is like for insurance, because technically I don't have to worry about that anymore. I just have my patients self-pay, and it's super cheap. But we're talking an under $20 test. You know, if you self-pay for it, can give you a lot of great information. And then from there, there's some other labs that I do with my patients, and depending on your age risk and your family history, you know, some imaging tests that we do. People have probably heard about CT, coronary artery calcium scores. And you know, those are important. Are they paid for by insurance? No, they're not. Okay. Are they still important? Yeah, they are, you know? And so they give us another data point so we can have a better 360 view at what's going on with your risk.
Right.
And so I think, you know, again, it's a time factor, and I have time to read, you know, what the recent guidelines are, and do we have access to these tests locally? We do. And so being able to order those for people, go through them, explain what they mean.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. So cardiovascular health is a passion of mine. I just think we have a long way to go.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing those ideas. I'm sure a lot of people will benefit from that, and even ask their current provider if they've never even heard of these things before, and get their thoughts. So it's extremely helpful. And also you had mentioned, like, you can get, you know, be sick at any age, have something going on at any age. I also think even if you feel really healthy, getting a baseline so you have something to compare it to has always been important to me. Like, you know, heart issues run in my family. So even the times where I don't know that something's going on, I've always wanted a baseline to compare to later and know what changes are occurring. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's super important, right? I mean, in a perfect world, if like radiation didn't exist, I think we would all want imaging, right? You know, we kind of want to know where things are. There's a peace of mind that comes with checking the box and knowing, like, I've looked at it, I'm ready to face whatever's there. Yeah. I did the test, I'm okay right now, you know? And so unfortunately we can't screen for everything. We just, there's tons of cancers we can't screen for. You know, we don't usually see cancer in the blood. And that's a big question I get all the time. Couldn't you tell that in my blood? You know, no, we can't really see that. There's markers, but they're not recommended for diagnostics right now. And
you probably shouldn't have told me that, because I always thought you could see it in the blood. So now I'm going to be like, Kelly, hold on. So this doesn't tell me I don't have
certain cancers, you know, like blood cancer or sometimes the bones. But no, they're not part of screening panels, and people should know that. Yeah. Right?
Because I made an assumption. I'm not going to lie. I've always thought it was in there.
Yeah. So again, I talked through that blood work with you guys. I'm never saying, so you have no breast cancer in here, you know? I mean, that's not a thing. So
yes, that's true.
Knowledge is power, right? Yeah. And so that's why we're recommending these other imaging tests. And so I think being able to have that dialogue is hugely important. Baselines are big, especially with EKGs. You know, I went back to that anemia example. So these are actual, like, deciliters of blood that you have. How much blood volume, actual volume, do you have in your body, right? And so you can be in this big normal range of, you know, 11 to 16. You might have been a 15 last year. If you drop to an 11, that's a problem. Yeah. You're still in the normal range, but you dropped that's like 2 pints of blood or more. You know, don't quote me on the exact of that, but it's somewhere in there. That's not a shift that really should be happening in that short of a time. And so then that would be something we need to look at. So absolutely, it's worthwhile. And, you know, the chronicity of your care matters too. And so staying with someone or keeping your records is a big deal. And I always super transparent about that with people. I want you guys to have your records, because you never know, you're going to be traveling. Something happens. Like, if you can pull it up on your phone, it's a big deal, right? And so that's one of the pros of electronic medical records, is that people do have a little bit better access to their information. I love that. I wish it was easier to get. And so we try and do that at our practice. But yeah, having a baseline testing is valuable on many fronts, many different systems of the body. Yes.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So thinking about balance, because I know that we brought it up before and you're dying to talk about this. So I know, obviously, your business, it requires a lot of attention. And you mentioned a husband and 3 children. Do you think it's possible to find balance in life? If so, have you achieved it? Where are we with balance?
Oh my. Yeah, I think my joke is always like, what is balance? Like, is there balance? I don't think that that's a thing. I think it's an unrealistic expectation. I don't think it's fair, to ourselves to think we're going to be able to like hit this magic perfect balance and everything's going to be in harmony and there's not going to be balls in the air and there's not going to be chaos. Like, that's not real life. And so I almost like get frustrated by that concept or even trying to achieve that, because I really don't know that it's attainable, or if it was, if I would even like that.
Yeah.
Because of my personality partially, but I want to be hard charging towards something.
Yeah.
And so kind of how I've navigated this like dissonance, cognitive dissonance about that is there's different priorities for different seasons.
Yes.
And as long as me and my people, right, whoever's on my support team, we're all understanding what season we're in, and we know this season's not going to last forever, and then the focus will shift to something else. Not saying you totally neglect everything, but there's always going to be like, this is at 70%, this is at 20%, this is getting 10% of my focus.
Yes.
Everything can't have 100 all the time.
No.
And like, it doesn't work.
No.
So I think taking that pressure off of myself as a mom and a professional has been very freeing. I don't know that I'm like nailing it at all, but I think, not having extra mom guilt, as a working professional is always welcomed. And that's one way that's really helped me is to just say, okay, for these next 2 months, it's going to be really busy. And I understand that. And Jeff's going to take more of a lead. And then in the next season, we know I'm going to miss that and we're going to swing back, And so I peel my schedule back a little bit. I'm more invested. I'm doing volunteer stuff with the kids. And so it feels a little bit more like an ebb and flow of a river than like trying to have a calm river.
Yeah. That's perfect. I agree completely.
Yeah.
We actually had this conversation recently because I have to measure it. I choose 3 areas of my life to prioritize in a given like quarter, right? And so I mentioned to you earlier, my big focus is that financial stability and trying to put that behind me. So of course, some of the other things are not getting the attention that they deserve. But it's the fact that you said there should be a conversation and people need to understand this is the season we're in and it's not going to look like this forever.
Yeah.
So
it's so helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because everyone gets on the same page, and then at the same time, just mentally knowing that there's an end to like sometimes this what feels like intensity and insanity is so helpful.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm just pushing hard for right now. It's not going to last forever. Then we're going to pivot. And I think it's really important for our mental health to know there's an end, there's a break, there's a shift, and it's a welcomed, like, kind of re-energizing shift.
Yeah, I literally just said last night, because like we're at the end of August, right? I said, oh yeah, I knew August was going to be pretty busy, but next month will be easier. And then I was like, oh my gosh, look at September. Okay, one more month of this. and it's always like that.
I know.
Like
and I think as an entrepreneur, right, that's like a specific to entrepreneur thing because you always have goals. You're always goal setting. You naturally are built to push.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where we have to practice just like self-discipline and knowing like, is this healthy for me to be pushing this hard in this area all the time? And I do find that hard to turn off also.
Yes.
But yeah, it's kind of being forced. Like my kids are going back to school, right? My little guy is starting a new preschool program. There's, this new practice for us. Everything just feels like there's a shift right now. And so recognizing that things feel a little out of step, and that's fine.
Yeah.
They should feel out of step. Everything's shifting, and so our routine is totally off. But a month from now, it'll be fine.
You'll find a new
It'll be
routine.
fine. We'll have a new rhythm and it'll be different.
Yeah.
And so, but just getting your head like above the clouds a little is helpful.
Yeah.
And no matter you're running a business or not, I think there's seasons to life,
It's so funny because that's my interesting transition right now because Caleb started kindergarten. He didn't go to preschool, so just started kindergarten. So I've like found myself working in a pickup line this week, and I've not experienced that before. So like, what is the perfect time to arrive, to leave in the least amount of time, and
to sit in the pickup line?
Yes,
the least. Yeah, I'm there with you. I
He's
get
my
it.
hot spot, and I'm like. There's literally, yesterday, I have to tell you this, it was so funny. In the pickup line, there was a cop sitting next to me, and I have my laptop open, and I'm like working. I'm like, is this going to upset him? Like, is this okay in the pickup line? And I'd like look away, inch forward a couple of feet. Like, is this going to be a problem?
I know.
I have things to do.
I had a very similar experience this week in the pickup line with the cop. Same thing.
That is so
like,
funny.
I'm technically parked right now,
yes,
sir. You know, if you
long
look
as I
in here, I'm technically parked. Yeah.
I did the same thing, and I had my phone up here in my holder, and I was like tapping on it, and I thought the same thing. Like, it's in park. It's in okay.
Park. Yeah, you're legal. Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, and it's not handheld. It's being held.
It's fixed. Yeah, you're good. Yep. I know. And you're thinking of all these things while you're actually doing your job. I mean, our minds are amazing.
Yes, they are. Thanks for taking care of mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate
you know, I'm an anatomy nerd, so I'll always zoom back to that angle.
Yeah, I love it. Well, let's talk about growing our minds a little bit. So how are you continuing to learn? I'm obsessed with lifelong learning, always growing. What are you growing in right now? You reading anything?
Oh, boy. Let's see. I think I actually did share on social media one of the things I was learning. So I'm trying to come back to my full fitness level pre my last child.
Okay.
Which is a challenge. You lose your fitness really fast. All of those people who have never done it, I don't recommend it. Don't take your pedal off the fitness gas. Keep it going. It's hard to recover. But yeah, so just reading research about like, what do we actually know about cardiorespiratory fitness, and what kind of a workout is actually going to be effective for my heart and lungs. And, you know, I don't just want to show up at the gym anymore. I don't have the time to just like hang out at the gym for 2 hours. I'm not a college student anymore when I used to do that for fun. Like I don't have the margin. And so I became obsessed with, for myself, learning, do we have any studies of what actually works around this?
Yes.
And we do actually.
Okay. I want to see these.
So I do have a reel about this, I think.
Okay.
But you guys can look up the Norwegian 4x4 interval training. And basically which kind of intuitively makes sense, but it's high interval. So high intensity exercise for 4 minutes at a time.
Okay.
And then a recovery period for 3 minutes. And then back up to this 4 minutes of intensity, and then back down. And you do 4 rounds of this. So 4 minutes at, 4 times. That's why it's called that. There's some other nuances about like exactly how high should your heart rate be, and how do we measure that, and how do you figure that number out, and all of that. So I'm putting that now in my patients, educational information, because I used it for myself, and it translates over to the healthcare that I get to teach people. So that's one area that I'm just kind of personally curious in, but then I'm better able to advise people on that, because, we always just say exercise and diet. Like that's not helpful information. And so being able to give people really specifics. So I'm always reading about fitness, prevention, whatever's on the forefront of that. I'm curious. I'm very intellectually curious about all the things. And so I'm always reading, journal articles, the latest postings. So most of my time on it is spent doing that, because there's just a ton to keep up on. There's a ton. I mean, as an internist, you're not just looking at the heart. Like we have the whole body to stay up with. And so if you want to be reading what's on the front edge, like that's a lot of time. Yeah. So most of my free time, honestly, is spent doing that, because I like it and I'm a nerd. And then
she's like, and I'm a nerd.
Embrace that at this season of my life. Like I geek out on that stuff. So that's fun. That's kind of like fun reading when I have time, and it's nice if it overlaps for my patients. And then I have been reading some business books lately. One of them was on networking, right?
Okay.
Being a power connector, I think it was called. And that's just like encouraging myself to like keep networking, and the benefit really that it provides to like everybody in your influence. And then the other one I'm reading is a business book that I'm blanking on, I think called Building an Elite Organization.
Okay.
And so it's just kind of pressing into making yourself write down like the DNA of your culture and very specifically how you want to get from A to B.
Okay.
And just logical goal setting stuff. But that's just when you have so many things going on, you may not communicate well to your team.
Yeah.
Or you may not mark off on your calendar. And so then you realize you're not achieving. And so just kind of challenging me to keep pushing and growing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. A good balance of business knowledge, right? You're gaining the business knowledge so you can grow that, and then also focused on your own health, which is cool to think about too, like that we're benefiting.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
You can like put it into practice, see if it works, and then share it with us.
And I actually love that, right? Because there's so much in medicine that I can't experience from my patients. Like I can't go through that surgery to give you firsthand experience. But one of the ways I can help people is like, I'm listening to you guys go through these experiences and I can, share that on with you. And so I think in my own health, it's the same way. It's a lot more relatable. And I can say like, listen, first time you do that 4 minutes is going to be rough. Like I actually didn't complete that first 4 minutes at the correct heart rate because I couldn't do it.
Oh, wow.
That's crazy. Yeah. That felt terrible, like mentally and physically.
I'm
so,
sure.
Okay, when I advise people to do that now, I'm going to tell them you might only do 2 minutes. It's fine. The next time you do it, you can add a minute and in 2 weeks you'll be good, but that's a lot more helpful information that I feel like connects. So as much as I can, like I go get the blood tests, like I go do all the stuff too, because
You're modeling it for us.
I want to be able to speak like truthfully on what it's like. So if I could do a bunch of the tests, I would, but.
Yeah, I'm curious if do you know Jessica Gordon? They started 540 Fitness.
I do through you.
Okay. I was going to say that episode. Did you listen to that episode?
I haven't. It's in my podcast.
Okay.
It's in my lineup.
I think you would really enjoy it. The geeky side of you would enjoy it
I love what they're doing. I know what they're doing in the community.
Yeah.
I don't know them personally.
Okay.
So it's in the queue. Maybe you can connect us.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Perfect.
I'm happy to connect you.
Thank you.
All right. So before we close things up, I always kind of want to summarize some key points. But as we pull it back to empowerment of your patients and even empowerment of yourself, leading yourself effectively, some things that I heard that you were sharing, you really knew where your strengths and your passion lie, right? And you wanted to be able to have an impact using the things that you love and enjoy, but in a way that balanced out with your life, right? And kind of fit the formula. And to me, that's why, when we talked about the theme of this episode, empowerment popped into my head, because it's not just about empowering other people, though you're modeling this for everyone, but it's like you're taking the stand for your life, right? And you're saying, I'm in charge of my life. I'm going to make the decisions that align with me and my values and what I'm good at. So I just wanted to point that out. I think that was really cool, the way that you chose to shift and find that thing that works for you. And I'm sure it's going to inspire a lot of other people too. Hopefully even people in healthcare that maybe can connect with your story. And you're going to get lots of phone calls and people reaching out to ask you, just as you reached out to others, right? To see if it was a good fit for you. So
welcome all the calls. I've done a lot of them. I almost brought that up when you asked about the leadership, like when I thought of myself as a leader. Because I realized a lot more people were paying attention to what I was doing inside of our field than I realized. And people have been reaching out and asking me what the experience has been like and asking me, what did it take to get from A to B. And that's the neat thing when we talked earlier about, when I started to have that shift from this is a solution for me to like this could really be a solution for other healthcare professionals. That is one of my visions with the business, is to be able to have other healthcare professionals who are burned out, which is what I was, if we call a spade, right? I didn't know that terminology then, but I was, who are in that scenario. And instead of them walking away from medicine and we're down another primary care provider in our community, maybe they can pivot, and maybe they can practice direct primary care and maybe that'll be a better fit for them. It probably won't work for everyone. It's a very different way to practice. There's a very different set of demands, and I think relationally, like it's a high relational way to practice medicine. And so it's for a certain fit. But if we can even capture those people, like we're not going to lose the impact on our community. And that's really exciting to me. And I feel like that's a mission that's bigger than me. And I felt like since a young like child. I was supposed to be in medicine. I don't know. I knew I loved anatomy, and like I knew I was a little nerd, you know, and I was good at it. So to be able to take that for me and then be able to spread that like influence out to other providers, and maybe that'll benefit their family, is super motivating. So I'm hopeful that we'll continue to be successful, and that people will continue to connect with getting their healthcare this way. And in doing so, I feel like I'm living my mission, and I'm able to like connect the dots for other people too. And that feels like magic to me.
I was going to say that's the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it
right?
really does.
Like living out your purpose and knowing like this is my purpose. This is what I'm here to do, and seeing what you're able to do for other people in the process and the impact that it's having on the community and beyond.
It's very exciting.
It is exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so I can't believe I didn't ask this at the beginning. My mind is blown.
What?
How did you come up with the name for the business?
Oh, geez. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of crazy. I was trying to think like, you know, I didn't want a standard name because what I'm doing is not standard.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to be, you know, Apple Blossom, whatever, you know, in our town. Like I mean, I love Apple Blossom, but I didn't want to like be in the same lane.
Yes.
It's a totally new concept. And so I just gave myself freedom to think like kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And what was organically me. And really why I did this was for my kids. And so I call them little smarty pants all the time.
Aww.
And so that was part of it. And I was like, oh, smarty pants, like the patients who pick this kind of care are very smart. Yeah. And so the name actually I almost hesitate on now because it kind of sounds arrogant if you don't know the heart behind it. Like, I'm not saying I'm smart for thinking of this. Like, I didn't even think of this model.
Yeah.
But
I didn't think of it that way,
well,
by the way.
Sometimes I have insecurities about that, right? Because like people don't know and like they think that's my personality. It's really not. But the heart behind that is the patients who are willing to get care outside of the traditional system are smart.
Yes.
It's a smart financial decision. It's a smart health decision. It's just very wise.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Smarty Pants, like that's fun. That's catchy. Yeah. That's something I say all the time. I feel like that's me organically. And so I just went with it.
I can't believe I haven't asked you that in a couple of years. It just hasn't come up. So I don't know if I told you the very first time that you ordered me lab work and I went in to have it done, they actually questioned whether or not it was real.
I know. It's funny. And so I get like this whole gamut of responses, right? Because I'm calling too. Like, hey, this is Kelly Botta. I'm a PA at Smartypants Medicine. And most people though in healthcare, like they love it because it is so different and refreshing. And then we get to have like a normal person conversation. Yeah. But yeah, it's a pretty like out there forward thinking name, but
it's
I'm
like
sticking
I
with
didn't
it.
just make up these lab orders. Like no, she exists, and they were like trying to look you up in the system. I'm like, seriously, don't mess with me right now.
I know, that's crazy. So obviously that wasn't at our preferred lab vendor.
It was in the very, very beginning.
Yes. So I think we're gaining credibility now in the community with our name, but it's a pretty fun thing to throw out. Yeah. And hopefully it feels fun, you know, like healthcare can be super scary.
It can.
You know, the setting is intimidating. It's sterile. It's not a warm environment, you know? And so I don't want that. I think it creates healthcare anxiety. I'm going into people's homes. It's a very personal experience, and I want it to feel different. And so if the name's different, that's okay. Yeah. It feels different. It's a good different.
It is. Yeah. It is. I love it. And now it's even more like meaningful to me. So
thanks for asking.
Yeah. So I always leave everybody with what I call a branching out challenge, and it's just based off of what we talked about in this episode, giving them a challenge, something to implement right away. I'm going to propose a challenge. Let's see if you're on board with this. Okay. So I was thinking that folks that don't currently have a primary care provider, that they maybe could consider that based off of what they heard today. Does that seem fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. And if you do have one, maybe think about what preventative care you're doing with them, because I also find that a lot of the time we're going in and we're treating symptoms, not really the cause, right? So getting that primary care provider to start looking ahead as you do. That's what I was thinking.
I love that.
You love it?
Yeah. And I would give a word of encouragement that it might catch the healthcare providers off guard.
Oh, yeah.
If you're pushing in for prevention. And that sometimes we're going to think testing. And not at every age is there a recommended test. But it can mean way more than that. It can mean talk to me about exercise. It can mean talk to me about what I can do with my diet. Talk to me about what's coming with menopause. Talk to me about, right? There's so many other things that are just a conversation about prevention. Doesn't even have to be a test, but just a conversation.
Yeah. It doesn't have to cost more either.
Right.
And they'll be smart by asking.
They will be. Advocating for yourself is actually absolutely 100% necessary for you to get the care you need in our market today.
Yeah.
100%. And so people feeling empowered from this episode, hopefully will catch that as well.
Yeah, I hope so. So what area are you currently serving? If people are interested in chatting with you about if this is a good fit for them, what area are you serving?
Yep. So we're in the greater Winchester area. So about a 30-minute radius from the heart of downtown Winchester is where I do house calls right now. I will go up to 45 minutes. There's a travel fee for that extra distance. And so right now that's kind of the perimeter of where we are. And then when we get a physical location as well, there'll be a choice then, for people to come from further.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. Anybody can drive to you.
Yeah.
They can truly
And I do, there's not a lot of practices around here practicing this way. And so there is interest from further out. And so I'm excited to be able to provide that for the greater community. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay, perfect. I wanted to make sure you got to share that. So where can folks find you?
Yep. So smartypantsmedicine.com, or you can find me on social media at Smartypants Medicine.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here today. I've been really looking forward to this episode. As soon as I was thinking about all the kind of areas of my wheel of life I wanted to cover, and I thought of health, and I knew I wanted to have you on here and kind of share all you've done for me. And I know we didn't go into detail, but you've been a huge part of my healthcare journey. Thank you for all you do for me and do for the community. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Yeah.
Appreciate you having me on.
No problem at all. All right, folks. So hopefully you found value in today's episode. If you want to go ahead and check out all of our other episodes, you can reach out on branchingoutpodcast.com and learn more about all the platforms we can be found on. Reach out on social media. We always want to hear from you exactly what you're learning, what you're taking away, and if you're completing the Branching Out Challenge. So be sure to let us know if you follow through and talk to your primary care provider, find one, or reach out to Kelly. So thank you so much for tuning in with us today. And until next time, keep branching out.